Hello, everyone, and welcome to TLC's Webinar Wednesday. I'm your host, Ria Stark, and I hope everyone had a really nice holiday break and a happy new year. We had a little bit of a break for our webinar series. This is the first one in 2024, and we are coming back very strong. We have quite the lineup, which I'll talk about more at the end of our webinar, but this is our first one. And for our regular attendees, you probably noticed we did start about half an hour early. That's just for this one. We'll be back at our usual time starting next week. And before I introduce our panel for today's topic, which is RFID and shelf management, I do have my usual housekeeping reminders to run through. The first is that this is being recorded. So if you would like to catch the replay or share this with any of your colleagues afterwards, we highly encourage that. It will be available on our website starting tomorrow at tlcdelivers.com/webinars. And as someone who is joining us live today, you have the opportunity to ask our panelists questions. So at any point, if you have a question for one of our speakers, please add that into the Q&A widget at the bottom of your screen, and we will answer those at the end. And my last point is that we do have a number of folks on our panel for the discussion. So if you want to change your view within Zoom, you can click on that view button in the top right. Or if you find the line between where the speakers and the presentation is, you can drag that to make it either bigger or smaller, however you need. All right, that is my housekeeping for the moment. Today's topic is back by popular demand from our user conference this last fall. And leading the conversation today will be Gretchen Freeman from our RFID company TechLogic. Welcome, Gretchen. And joining her to present two different perspectives on both RFID and shelf management in libraries, we have panelists from Rochester City School District, as well as the Community Library in Idaho. So that is everyone on our call, and I want to hear who our audience is. So before I hand it over, I do have one poll that will appear on your screen in just one moment. So the first poll is whether or not your library system uses RFID. And a couple of answers here, yes, and we love it, or are you in the process of converting, or not yet, but maybe you're thinking about it, or no, or you're unsure. And then if you are using, if your library is using RFID, what materials do you tag for those? So we've got books, different AV, book club kits, library of things, circulating makerspace, other. If it is other, let us know in the Q&A. We'd be happy to hear that. All right, we've got a lot of answers coming in so far. We're at about 85%, 86% yes, and we love it. Great to hear. And mostly books. Let me go ahead and end that poll, share the results. You can all see that. So a lot of folks are familiar with it, but can't wait to hear everyone's perspective. I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to you, Gretchen.
Thank you, Ria. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday, follows Taco Tuesday. I'm happy to be here, thrilled to be here with our partner, our sister company, TLC, and representing TechLogic today and talking about my favorite topic, RFID, radio frequency. I'm joined by an esteemed panel today, two libraries representing Rochester City Schools. We have Dr. Colleen Sadowski, who is Executive Director for Library and Media Services, and Dr. Melissa, who is Systems Librarian for the library system. Rochester is distinctive because they completed both a migration of their ILS to LS2 for schools and an RFID conversion in the same year. So hats off to them. They're going to tell us about that process. And our second panelists are from the Community Library in Ketchum, Idaho. And we're represented by Pam Parker, who's their Director of Library Operations, and Susie, Bille, the Systems Librarian. So welcome all on the panel and welcome to our audience. Next slide, please. Our topic today, radio frequency or RFID, has to do with that technology and the advantages it brings to the library, and also the very particular qualities of RFID. So I'm going to do a little bit of introduction, even though most of you are using RFID and already know this, but some may not. Radio frequency, or RFID, is another way to represent the barcode in your materials. And so you have both a paper or printed barcode label on the material, and now that barcode number, or the item ID, is also encoded or written or programmed to an RFID tag. The real sweet spot for RFID is that it is not a line of sight technology, as barcodes are. And by that, I mean, in order to read a barcode, you have to use a line of sight barcode scanner or reader, and you have to scan each item individually. RFID opens up a whole new level of opportunity to use those tags in different ways, because they can be read using an antenna or a pad or a handheld scanner, and many of them can be read at once. So a group of tags or barcodes can be transmitted at once. It's a very fast multi-item read with an antenna, either on a pad or using a handheld scanner. About a 12-inch swath or sphere of items can be read at once. So now you can see that checkout and check-in can occur with multiple items at the same time. And for self-checkout and for your library users, it's absolutely magical and fast. It's easy. So RFID has been adopted by now by thousands of libraries. It's been around about a little over 20 years now in libraries, and was adopted early on in 2000s. It was at that time an expensive venture. Each tag, when I started working with RFID, each tag was 65 cents an item. They're now down to around 10 to 11 cents an item. And so they're more affordable for libraries, and particularly when you weigh the benefit against the cost of a 10-cent tag. It's not an insignificant cost, but it's still becoming more affordable. And in the last decade, RFID has really exploded by libraries using RFID. RFID tags need to be installed in each item. You see the illustration here on the screen of a tag placement inside the back of a book, where they are typically placed. Each item in the collection has to be opened and tagged during a process called conversion. So the barcode is read using a barcode scanner, and then written using special RFID programming or writing software. It's written to the tag, and now that tag contains the barcode number. Once you've gone through your entire collection in conversion, now you're ready to go. And from then on, each new item, each new acquisition is tagged as it arrives in the library. Once you've completed your conversion process, now you're ready to go, and you start taking advantage of RFID tags for things like checkout, either self-check or staff checkout, check-in, multi-item check-in. You can use RFID for item security. That's an added bonus that comes on the tag, that you have a security marker on the tag. With installing RFID security gates, you now have the additional benefit of security on the tag and in each item. You also can take advantage of RFID for automated materials handling, and can use the tags. It's a simplified sorting process using RFID tags. And then what we're talking about today, shelf management and inventory using a handheld scanner. And this is a particularly sweet implementation that uses RFID tags to help you in inventory and shelf managing. Michael, go on to the next slide, please. And this is where we're showing you the speed at which you can scan your shelves using a handheld TRAK device. So the pass of the shelves is picking up the barcodes on each of those items. And you can see how quickly that scan works using a handheld, using the TRAK handheld scanner. Much, much faster than reading barcodes on those items, which you would have to do item by item. And if you're scanning low shelves in a school library, you may be down on your knees in order to read the barcodes on those items. You can see how that's much more ergonomically advantageous with RFID. Next slide, please. So doing inventory with the TRAK wand means that you're scanning the shelves with the wand and gathering up all of the barcodes, which are then sent to the ILS, to LS2, to Carl, or to whatever ILS you're using, and submitted into the ILS. So the barcodes are sent into the inventory function, and the item records are updated as having been inventoried as we're scanning. That means that once you have completed a section or your entire collection, that now the ILS will process those items that are read, the barcodes that have been submitted. It bypasses anything that's out in circulation and then creates a list of missing items, things that should have been present on the shelf, but weren't there when we scanned through the shelves. So my fellow panelists are going to talk more about their respective inventory processes. Next screen, please, Michael. The other function of several that TRAK offers, but one that is very valuable for any type of library, and that's exception scanning. Exception scanning or shelf management means that we link the TRAK wand to the ILS, and we link it via building Wi-Fi. So now it's communicating via Wi-Fi real time right to the ILS. And now you begin to scan looking for exceptions statuses on the shelf. So that means that items that are lost, missing, claimed returned, deleted, any other status except in or on shelf is alerted to the operator. And one of the real advantages of doing an exception scan is that there's no sequential, you don't need to do any sequential shelf scanning or collection scanning. There's no timeline. You can scan any part of the collection at any time and scan for exceptions. And the other advantage is just the speed and the ease at which you can do that scanning and be alerted of any exceptions that are seen on the shelf. With LS2 version 5.6, the other advantage is that the last seen date on the item is updated as you're scanning. So in effect, you're doing a dynamic inventory. You could assign a section of the shelves or a range or a collection. You could assign those to staff or to your shelvers, and then you can do that scanning as often as you'd like, monthly, quarterly. And every time you do an exception scanning run, you're alerted to exceptions and they can be removed to be handled and updated. So in effect, you're cleaning the catalog every time you do an exception scan. Let's go ahead and turn to our guest panelists today and to Rochester. Let them take it away and tell you about their experience using that wand.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. We are here from the Rochester City School District in Rochester, New York, and we're going to talk to you about our conversion. As was mentioned earlier, we had quite a year. We not only transitioned our catalog, we also switched to RFID. So it was a very tightly orchestrated process to get all of that to happen successfully. You can go to the next slide. I'm going to tell you why we decided to do this. And as you can see, this is a picture of one of our libraries, and I'm just going to use this as a talking point. Our collections were a bit of a mess. We have pre-COVID and we have post-COVID. And we had been looking into RFID prior to COVID. So it wasn't something that was brand new to us. We were interested in it, and we were exploring our options. And then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, in our schools, we scrambled to close with very little notice. And it was a mad dash to get books in the hands of kids. We didn't know how long we would be closed for. We wanted to make sure they had literature at home. So we were just sending kids home with books, getting everything out. After COVID, things were a mess. We were closed for, oh gosh, from March to June of the one year. We were definitely closed for the entire full following year. And I can't remember if we opened the year after that or not. They've all started to blend together. But it was definitely a year and a half of being closed. We would occasionally be able to come in very rarely to get stuff that was needed. But after that first mad distributing of things, it didn't happen again until kids came back to buildings. So when staff came back, stuff was everywhere. As you can see, these shelves are a little trashed. Books fell on the floor. You have stacks of instructional materials on top of the shelves underneath that nonfiction sign. Boxes of new things that were never even opened or distributed. Things were everywhere. We had injuries. Librarians tripping on boxes, librarians tripping on stacks of textbooks or other materials that were piled up in libraries. We've had a few resulting knee surgeries from that. We've had shoulder injuries. And in addition to that, the carpal tunnel issues from traditional scanning and inventory that would take place previously. In our schools, the state requires us to do inventory once a year. That wasn't always happening. And the reason for that was because of the school schedules. In an elementary school, typically our librarians have a fixed schedule where they see classes until the very last day of school. And that does not give time to get the library shelves in order and to do an inventory. Our inventories would take place and take as long as, for our largest libraries, a week, if not a little bit more, just to scan every book in our largest library. And that is tipping the book off the shelf, scanning it. Next one, tip, scan, going all the way through. Up and down, as you can see, there's books on the bottom shelves. So you're, up and down on your knees, and that does take a toll. So that annual inventory wasn't always happening because of time constraints. So we were looking to make things easier for our staff. I pitched it as a fiscally responsible solution, because we would be hopefully reducing time out due to injuries, hopefully also maximizing instructional time, because we wouldn't be requesting to close school libraries early in order to do inventory. And it just seemed like it would be a much better fit and solution for us than the traditional way that we had done it previously. We also knew going into this that it was going to be a huge amount of work on our part. Our collections needed a lot of work. You can't really see it in that picture, but our collections were very out of date. So we knew we had to do significant collection development to even get to the point of transitioning our catalog and tagging everything in there. So next slide, and we'll talk about how we got there in our process.
Okay. So here are some of our librarians taking a look on one of our first days where we introduced RFID and the process to them on our superintendent's conference day. The actual training we gave them was about 15 minutes long. You really don't need long to figure out how to use RFID to do the encoding of the tags. So we had an elementary, and then we had a high school that we started with. We gave everyone the overview of how to encode a book, and then we let them go on to the libraries. So we had pre-ordered the equipment, about 400,000 tags. By the time we finished, we still have about 28,000 tags left, because as we went through, we did quite a bit. We found that it was actually really handy to do this process because typically when you do a standard inventory, you pull the book off a shelf a little bit, scan it, push it back on. With RFID tags, you had to open the book. So when we opened the books, we found writing, scribbles, missing pages. Probably the most interesting thing I found was a package of ranch dressing squished between the back cover and the thing, and I can still smell it, I tell you, a year later. So we found all kinds of books that we needed to discard, mold, various reasons that they had to go. So it really helped us clean up our collections quite a bit. And it, of course, left us with extra tags, which we are, using as new books come in. Most of our vendors, for those curious, do send us the books with the RFID tags already encoded. So it's not something you have to worry about. Once you convert your library over, you can get your materials coming in already processed. However, we do use those extra tags for any donations or books people get from, say, Donors Choose. So after we started getting everyone trained, and we practiced at 2 of our libraries, an elementary and a high school, the librarians were then given until inventory time in June of that year to go ahead and do, the magic. It was extremely impressive. We had volunteers from the community. Librarians had student helpers. Librarians had, in a couple cases, husbands or wives came in and helped them sticker books. They took the time during the school day. We did get some extra funding, so we were able to hire a few to go in an hour or so after work for about 20 hours over a few months' time to help encode and tag. And we also had even, some of our building subs came in and helped during their time when they weren't subbing in the classroom. It was just amazing, the process and how many people, stepped up and helped us do this. Through a librarian in our schools, we don't have clerks. So there were staffs of 1, with the exception of 2 schools where there were 2 librarians present in a couple of our high schools. But most of the time it was 1 librarian on our own, tagging and encoding. So at the end of this process, we encoded, well over 350,000 items. Our Department of the Arts is also encoding this year the musical instruments. And they're almost complete with that process of encoding all the new musical instruments that have come in this year. Then they're going to go in and, as students return them, they will, of course, encode. So by the time we're done, it's becoming quite robust, and how well the librarians are using it, how they handle encoding. And again, the worst part of the process at the time was how boring it actually became, because 15 minutes of training, put your first few stickers on, you're all excited, you're coding away, and then you repeat for about 5,000 times. So that repetitiveness did get some of the librarians, and a lot of them said no more than 3 or 4 hours at a time, we're done. And then, so our work parties, as we've had some during like some of our breaks, about 4 hours at the most before, I started glassing over. But librarians would gang up, they would go to other libraries after school or even during the day if they had time, help out there. It was a really nice community project for us to do. Okay. The next slide.
So, Melissa mentioned how we did some weeding. And so before we started the process, we had everyone weed, and they thought they weeded until, like Melissa said, they started actually physically looking at each book. And then they were like, oh, I don't think I really want to put a tag on this book. This book needs to go too. And it wasn't just the ranch dressing. It was, just the age and other things. So they proceeded to continue weeding. Overall, we reduced our collection size by 80,000 books. So that's how many from where we thought we were starting at to how many we ended up weeding from the collection. It has improved our collection age, for sure, along with an infusion of some additional cash that we had to buy more books. That has, greatly helped as well. It has made our libraries more welcoming. As you can see in these pictures here, you know, they don't look like that library on that first slide. That was sloppy looking, books falling all over, books on the floor, books piled on top everywhere. We unfortunately, you know, have this habit of holding on to things and treating our school libraries as museums. And that's historically due to the underfunding that school libraries get, and also libraries in general in many places in our country. And so it was really hard previously for librarians to let that stuff go. They felt as though they had to hold on to it. And I think going through this process, a lot of them feel a lot better now about, you know, I really do need to have these great new books on the shelves, and it's so much more welcoming. And kids, we're seeing so many kids coming into the libraries now and excited to be there and excited to borrow books, and even staff come in and say how wonderful the libraries look. I don't
see. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. I was going to mention our accuracy rates of when the students come in to locate materials has improved greatly, because now that we have everything wanded in the system, it's easy for those lost missing books to be found. So not only are they coming in, seeing great new books, they're able to find them.
And the other thing we were looking forward to with locating books, when you check out materials to students, they'll disappear in their classroom, you know, and the kids can't find it. They got put in a basket or on a shelf. And now the librarian can go into a classroom with the wand and just walk along the shelf or wand a basket, and it'll alert them if there's a book that's on that shelf that has a tag in it. So that will also help in getting materials returned back to the library.
Very cool. These collections look beautiful.
Thank you. Thanks for all your help getting them there.
What's the average collection size for one of your school libraries?
Ooh,
About 6,000. For elementary schools, our average collection size is about 4,800. For K-8 schools, it's about 6,000. And then for our high schools, of course, we're into 10 to 12,000 for the majority of our large high schools. Our largest collection right now for an elementary is about 18,000. Our largest collection, which is, in fact, this is Edison Tech, you see here with the curved ceiling, that's about, I think that was about 14,000 last I checked.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, it was very, apology. I just going to mention, it was very easy to wand. Instead of taking days, we wanded the Edison High School collection in a matter of hours, because we were able to gang up with wands, and we used 3 wands at the same time to go to town.
Beautiful. This, speaking of collection size, Rhea, would you like to poll our audience as to collection size?
Yeah, absolutely. In just a moment, you'll see a poll on your screen. How many physical items are in your library's collection? And that's for all sites, if you know that number, roughly speaking. So is it under 50,000? Are you in the 50 to 250,000 range? 250 to 500,000, over 500,000? Or are you unsure? That's kind of a big ask. I wouldn't know off the top of my head either. So the results are coming in, and we're having a fairly even split, actually. The largest group so far is the 50 to 250,000 range, at about 33%. So a nice spread across all of them. Go ahead and end that, show the results. You can all see that's the biggest one. And then the next highest is the 250 to 500,000. So quite a lot of physical items across all those collections.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you, Colleen and Melissa. If you have questions for Rochester, would you enter those into the Q&A for us, and we'll take those at the end of our webinar? Great. Thanks so much. Let's move now to Ketchum, Idaho, snowy Ketchum at this time of the year. And here from the community library, they're veteran RFID users and have been using both inventory and shelf management for quite some time. So take that away, Pam and Bille.
Thank you, Gretchen. It's really nice to hear from Melissa and Colleen again on their experience. We are right in that 100,000 range, so kind of with the majority of the people in attendance today. And I think the question there becomes, how much do you leverage the RFID with what could be considered a smaller collection? I will say that right now, this bin behind me is our automated materials handler making some noise. It's been quiet until just now. When we tagged originally 5 years ago, our intention was to add a relatively small sorter. It's 4 bins plus an exception bin, so 5 bin sorters. And that was really us potentially savings with staff, but also just on handling of books constantly. We're a fairly small staff, anywhere from 2 to 4 people in the library per day. Pretty much all day, every day, we were checking in books and out books. So that was really our original impetus for adding RFID. Then we looked from there how to leverage it beyond. And we added 3 self-checkouts, 1 at the children's end and 2 towards the adult end. And then we knew from the beginning that there was this thing called the wand. I actually have ours here today. And we didn't add it until after we had gotten these other technologies successfully rolled out and the entire collection, of course, RFID tagged and encoded. But I think it's one of my favorite aspects of this transition. You know, relatively speaking, it is not an expensive purchase. It comes on this Microsoft Surface with a keyboard, talks via Bluetooth with our so-called wand, which impresses everybody. But it's got a software, shelf managing software that is easy to use. And we have now some, desk staff utilizing it, as well as volunteers. That's kind of my latest foyer, is seeing how that goes, because it is that easy. I will maybe ask you to go to the next slide there, Michael, and we can talk a little bit about the reasons that I felt that is important, where we're gaining benefit from this. It does save staff time in that sort of low level shelf maintenance type work, where you're literally going book by book to try to see if there's issues. I say here it's at least 10 times faster. It used to take us about a half an hour to do 1 6-shelf section. Now that can take as little as 3 to 5 minutes. Sort of depends on what function you're actually doing and how clean your collection is, because it does get better over time. And we're getting to the point now where I just did a 6-section area yesterday to just kind of practice for this upcoming talk, and I was able to accomplish that in about a half an hour and found 2 missing items, whereas earlier you would find 5 to 10 missing items in a couple of sections and need to go back and correct those. But obviously over time, I think we're about 1.5 years into using this, got through the entire collection last year, and once you do that, you start to reap some of the benefits. Saves borrowers time. I have been a CIRC manager for 10 plus years. And so my thoughts on this are, you do deal with a lot of people who just can't find a book, and you have to go out there and help them try to find it, and maybe have somebody else try to look to have second eyes on it. It's just not very efficient to have books out there that should be where they are. And I'll talk a little bit towards the end of this summer here about inventory and the role in making sure that things that are out there, that are supposed to be out there, are out there. So that is a process we've added to the way that we implement the wand this current year. And TLC's software is capable of inventories, as I'm sure most of you know. The wand talks directly via SIP and updates those statuses, and then we're able to take a look at what books should be out there that aren't out there. And now on to minimizing the time. Oh, thank you, during which an item goes missing. This is kind of a pet peeve of mine, things can go missing for years. I like to know what those are and try to bring that number down. And we have brought that down really tremendously in the last couple of years that we've been doing this. So I'll let Susie talk a little more about how that has been leveraged to be able to show our books that are on order in the pack, due to the fact that we don't have a gabillion books in missing or lost status. That would also show if we were to flip that on. And maybe next slide, Michael. And there's a little bit of a blurb about deploying on order. We think it's great that people can put holds on books that are coming. It builds a really nice dialogue with the patrons at the desk. And then the last would be just the employee ergodynamics and job satisfaction. And we would often try to get through inventories and or shelf reads. And as most of you know, I don't have to tell you that that's difficult to find the time. People don't like to do it for much more than about an hour. And some people have physical situations where it's problematic with knees and backs and wrists and such. So I'm really a believer in this being something that most of our staff can be directly engaged with without a lot of bending or stooping. And we're finding it, I believe, helpful to get the employees back engaged with that process and with a kind of a positive attitude towards it. So I don't want to go on too much longer. Susan has been our systems librarian for as long as I've been in circulation and has done much of the implementation of this and the brain power behind figuring out how to leverage this. So I'll let her talk a little bit, and she'd be a good one to ask questions too as well. Susie, anything to add to that?
Well, you forgot your wanding is fun slide. Wanding is fun.
I find it
actually
fun.
Everybody loves to wand. That's one of the things that I've seen. Everybody wants to use it. Everybody loves it, and they all want to go out there. And we only have one wand, so everybody wants it, and that's probably a good thing. It's. I think I'll talk about what Pam said with the on order stuff. To begin with, when we started after we RFID'd. We had 110,000 books on our shelves, and we had so many missing and lost, and books that didn't have titles in the catalog anymore, that had actually been removed because we couldn't find them, but they were still out there on the shelves. We had so much of that the wand basically helped clear that up. And so when we started our whole inventory in the collection, which we had never done before, we went shelf by shelf and did it very slowly and very carefully, and used the wand to identify, does this have a tag? Gee, does the tag actually come up with a title? Because it might not. So we found tons and tons of missing, lost, shelving errors, mismatches between what the spine said where this book should be and what the computer said where this book should be. And you could see all of that within the inventory, within the TLC, or not the TLC, but the TechLogic software, because we asked them to add the barcodes, or to add the collections to the readouts. So you could see the readout, you could see the shelf location, you could see the collections, and you could make some really fast decisions about what was working, what wasn't working. So it did take us a long time to go through the collection that first time, but once we did that, we were able to basically turn on in the TLC land in our pack all of the functioning that shows our missing and lost and the on order stuff within the pack, so that people could actually see and come to us to the desk and say, well, I want this book, but it says it's missing. And so then we would know, gosh, maybe we should get another copy of this. It's been missing. We had some interaction with people rather than it just not showing, which is what had been for the last 25 years. And that helped us, I think, have a better interaction with our people and what they were looking for. So after cleaning up the collection that first time, we've tried to use the wand in a bunch of different ways. So we're always looking at how it works, what could work, and can it be more efficient, and can we have more accuracy? So you can catch problems that you can't see with a visual check. You know, the items in the wrong collection or a shelf location error, something like that, just the general ones. For instance, in fiction, if you're doing all fiction and all of a sudden you notice, oh, there's a Dewey that's popping up, then you say, well, that's not right. So you can immediately pull that and fix that. So those little things like that, it's helped us clean and eliminate a lot of mismatched books, which is wonderful. The other thing we've done is take an entire cart that is ready to be deleted, and you can just wand the deletion cart, and with some manipulation you can take those barcodes. This is the latest upgrade with TLC gives us the opportunity to actually wand, and those you can do an inventory, and it shows up in the TLC inventory module. But before we had that option, you can take you can wand and move all of the barcodes with some manipulation into and upload those into a collection space, and then you can just delete. You can delete all of that, all those barcodes. So that's a lot faster than opening up each book and looking for the barcodes and doing it one by one. So let's see, what else do we do? Oh, after a bookmobile, it looked like, Rochester's first slides of that's what the bookmobiles look like when, at the end of the summer. And so the gals that's in charge of the bookmobile just walks in there and wands the whole thing. And then they say, oh, well, this is what we have missing. So it's a pretty fast way to identify that. So in the future, I think what we're talking about doing is we could use it. We have a lot of evolving displays and a lot of display spots in the library. So you can actually set up a list and say, these are all the books we think we have on display, and send it to somebody. Can you go out there and just wand all of our display areas and see if those books are there? And pretty quickly, you find out these 225 books that are on display, whether or not they're there or not. So that's one of the future things we want to do.
Kudos to you, Susie, and to Pam. I think you have really been experimental in terms of trying the wand in all kinds of different applications. So good for you. Susie, you referred to something I'd like to highlight, which is that you found materials that did not retrieve a title from the catalog. So they were tagged, but when they were scanned, there was no title found. That indicates an item that was deleted from your library, from the catalog, but it's still on the shelves.
Yeah,
So
I don't want to even think about how many of those there were. There were, I mean, Pam can attest it, there were a lot. There were a lot. They had been misfiled. So then when we couldn't find them, eventually, they just left the building. The titles left the building anyway.
Yeah, and Susie would come back with kind of truckfuls, and she'd say, okay, I got to stop now and find out what these are. So that first time through, you're going to probably have the similar experience. Yeah. And the screen itself brings those up as a not-in system. So it has features that allow you to identify different aberrations in status. And then of course, if it's not assigned at all, and it has a tag in it. In other words, it didn't get recorded, encoded when you went through your conversion process. It does see that it has a tag that has not been encoded. So you can clean that up too, which allows you to encode rather rapidly in the beginning if you have a large collection, because you can come back and catch some of that.
I love that. Those title not found and your missing materials that are located with the wand, you can look at those as treasures that you've found and money that's been saved. So that's part of the benefit returned to the library, is finding materials that you don't need to replace or that you can restore to the collection. So that's actual money found out on the shelves.
Great. Yeah, and I'd say I'd agree with Pam that our main thing at the front desk was we were just happy we don't have to go out there as often and help people find things that, send 3 different people out there to look at 3 different shelves.
And you can have holds on missings, of course. And yesterday I found Oliver Sacks' Gratitude, which is a very little book. So it must have just gotten looked when somebody went to pull it. And sure enough, I was able to see that was flashed red that it was missing, and that solved or filled a hole.
Very good. In those processes, finding those missing items or purged items, you simply could not do that with barcodes. So it really is a unique benefit of RFID and being able to use that handheld scanner to do those kinds of things. Thank you so much. If you have questions for Susie and Pam, if you would put those into the Q&A. I see we have a couple of things to get to with Q&A. And Rhea, do you have the other polls you'd like to post now?
Yeah, thanks, Gretchen. I do have another poll based on inventory. So in just a moment, you'll see that on your screen, which is about how often does your library perform an inventory, ranging from the very frequent of weekly or biweekly, maybe it's more a monthly level, all the way up to we're supposed to be doing inventory. So wherever you fall on that scale, let us know. And also, what kind of a library are you? We have a lot of different library types, both as customers and on this webinar today. So we want to hear from you as well. And it looks like the majority right now are showing up as public libraries, but we do see some school libraries on there representing too. And the majority of responses so far are in the maybe once a year category or the never. Well, I mean, when you're scanning barcode by barcode, sometimes it's hard to be able to do an entire inventory within your library system.
And I do recommend to publics that once you've got RFID in place, you can use exception scanning to do dynamic inventory along the way as often as you'd like. So that ominous and just that huge process of inventory can be much more manageable. Put the time to doing more frequent exception scanning rather than a massive inventory, which, as we know, goes out of date within 2 weeks. It starts to wobble again. So do you want to take a couple questions, Rhea?
Yeah, absolutely. And also a special thanks to Michael Finnern from TechLogic, who's been managing these slides and getting us to the next one. So we'll leave this up with some contact information, but we are going to go through some questions, and we have had a few come in so far. So the first one, I'll go ahead and take this one. It is, where does one see the last seen date in LS2 staff? Gretchen, you mentioned that at the top of the call. And I'm sure that that's not a field that is visible with an LS2 staff. That was back-end data work to be able to see the date of when that item was last seen. And so there are able to do reporting against that. So you can run reports based on it, but it's not a physical location you would see on LS2 staff.
Actually, I can see that on LS2 staff now with the newest one.
Oh.
So when you run the lists and actions at the end, in the end panel of LS2 staff, it'll show, you can sort by last seen date. There's a whole bunch of tags with, if you run like a whole collection, then last seen date will be in there. It'll be an inventory date and it'll be last seen on. So I've been doing that to find out whether or not there's been a lot of whether we missed a shelf or something. If we did a really fast scan, oh, did I miss a whole shelf before I close the inventory? I'll go back in and run that, and then I'll see, oh, there's everything in here I missed, so I have to go back and do that shelf.
Awesome. Thank you, Susie. I learn new things every time I do a webinar. So
it might just be in the newest version. We have the, I think, second to newest version.
Gotcha. Thank you. This next one, it looks like has already been answered, but I'll read it out loud anyway. For Rochester, did you purchase a wand for each location, or how did you distribute wands to cover inventories that probably occur all around the same time? Dr. Sadowski, you want to elaborate on what you responded in there?
Sure. We didn't initially purchase for every site, and mainly that was a financial reason for that. As we've been living with this for over a year now, Melissa has gotten more and more requests for people to have their own wand, to be able to do this every week or to spot check whenever they wanted to and not have to borrow it and check it out. Our initial plans were to add more every year, and that is still our plan, is to purchase more each year and add to it.
And we have 13 wands for 40 sites currently. And because of the amount of time it takes to use the wand, we can actually do 2 sites a day if they want to. What we find though is when they borrow the wand, they like to hold on to it Colleen said, they don't like to give it up because they want to go back. If they find a missing book, they don't want to go back and just look for that missing book. They want to take the wand with them and use the wand to look for the missing book. So it's a learning curve. I expect inventories to go much faster this year. The last year was the fastest we have ever had.
As you can tell from what Susie described, there are other applications for the wand. In my former library system, we started with 5 wands for 18 libraries, and that quickly moved to 16 for 18. So yes, each library will find very creative ways and labor-saving ways to use it.
Great. Thank you, everybody. It looks like I froze up for just a moment, but I think I'm back. So I'll go ahead with the next question. Susie, could you please elaborate on the process of uploading a wanded cart of materials into LS2?
Sure. So what I do is I scan the cart, and what that gives me is the printout like you see on this screen here. And I take that file, which is just a plain text file, and I open up in a text manager, and I simply copy the barcodes only. And then those barcodes are in a separate file. So I take that barcode list, and you can upload that into LS2 staff. And what we've done is we've made one of our holding codes is called delete. So I simply take all of these barcodes and I upload them into the delete holding code, and then you can gather them once you're in the cataloging side to delete them, because it's everything in that holding code.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's in the item transfers area under staff services that you do that, right, Susie?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, you can upload files.
You can upload a file, yeah.
Thank you. And then the next question is, how does shelf reading fit in with using the wand? Gretchen, do you want to take this one?
Sure. You can see in the report on the screen that it can give you shelf location, and you can use that to identify an item that is, I would say, grossly misshelved. It's in the wrong collection. What RFID cannot do, the technology simply cannot do, is a sequential read or list of the items on the shelf. So if you picture the wand is scanning more in a swath or a sphere, so it's scanning many barcodes and many items around it. It's not scanning in a sequential fashion. So it won't come down to telling you this item is 2 places away from where it should be, but it will give you those collection codes, and so you'll be able to identify grossly misshelved materials.
I might be able to speak to this a little bit because I do train people on how to use it. I've done it myself a lot. And my technique is, you're not going to get an ordered list in the shelf manager, but you can see the shelf location, and so you can eyeball that. So we do train people, and this is kind of something Susie came up with. Keep an eye on that, because if it says 333 and you're over in the 600s, you know you've got an issue there. And then you can do the same thing on the shelf as your last step, as you're kind of straightening out and moving to the next shelf, kind of eyeball across and see if you see something that is out of order. Now, traditionally, we would have done that with a fine-tooth comb. Now it's more or less, we're just having, you're touching the items, you're there, go ahead and have an eyeball for it. And there's another strategy when you're doing a full-on inventory, you can move on a quicker pace, but this would be a little more of a regular maintenance type of approach to it.
I think what also happens too after RFID is in place is to train staff who are assisting customers or pulling holds, that as soon as an item is not located where it should be, to place that in a missing status. So now immediately you're going to be able to find it the next time you scan, those missing items pop up. And you just have to retrain thinking, instead of going back to look at a shelf for a missing item or for an item you didn't find. Don't keep looking. It's kind of the definition of insanity. Don't keep going back there, but instead set it in a missing status. Ria, I see the next question, and I'll take that one as well. It has to do with the wand interfacing with LS2, and it does interface directly into the ILS. The exception scanning mode that I talked about, it's directly interfaced and it's live, it's real time, so it's checking status on the ILS as you scan. Inventory as well, you're feeding directly into the ILS and not loading, downloading, uploading lists. TRAK has the ability to find a list of items. If you load a list into it, it can locate the list, but that's probably not the mode that most of our customers use. They instead are using gather barcodes for inventory or do exception scanning and speak live to the ILS.
Thanks, Gretchen.
Mhm.
Yeah, and within library.solution, when you start that inventory, you click a holdings code and select start inventory on that, take the wand out to the shelf, and you'll be able to see those updates within the system. But you can also use the wand with other ILS as well. So wanted to be able to address that.
Yeah,
I also, there was a question appended about.
Did Gretchen freeze up? I thought, I would perhaps add that that was really the deal
The
sealer.
encoding.
Oh, there she is. I'm
Encoding
sorry.
can be read by with tags from other vendors.
Thanks, Gretchen. We caught the tail end of that, but we froze up for just a moment. But I'll
Oh.
pass it to Pam because she was going to add to it as well.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
that we did look at a couple of different systems, and this was just as soon as we knew we could use SIP to see real-time statuses, it is all the difference. I think from other industries where they're uploading lists and whatnot, it's just not an extremely efficient or fun system on a regular basis. And other vendor products that we looked at weren't capable of communicating with our ILS or any ILSs. So I think this is a really unique and wonderful solution.
Thanks,
I
Pam.
can, I can
Go
add
ahead,
that
Susie.
I'd love to see that. I'd love to see TLC improve the level of what the wand can actually add to the ILS system as well, because I'd like to be able to scan my delete cart right into a title space. That's my next ask.
We'll work on that, Susie.
Yeah, we'll get that
Thank
into
you.
LS ideas.
Thanks.
I do see a couple more questions as well, but while I answer those, I'm going to launch the last poll. This is whether or not folks would like more information. So I'll just leave that up on the screen if you are looking for more information. And the reason I asked that is I see someone asked, where can I find instructions on using the wand directly with library.solution version 5.x? And we'd be happy to be able to show you that. Click the yes on that poll, but also that's available on LS Community for current customers, or one of our panelists would be able to speak to that as well if there's any additional information that helped you when you were going live. How about throw it over to Rochester, since you just implemented TLC this year and went with RFID. What were some of the resources that you found useful?
One of the major resources we found useful was just using your contact us to ask questions when we had them come in. Because it was our first time, we actually used the inventory process to also find missing shelves where librarians missed encoding. So we do expect this year to go much smoother, because the first year of encoding, we encoded a lot, things got missed. So now it's much smoother. But as to the help, the LS2 community site had some good information, because there's some TechLogic information on there too. But it's very simple. Once you get the connection set up, and it feeds right into your inventory. So once it gets into your inventory, you're really using the inventory features, the reports for last seen date, which does, I see there's a question, it does update in real time, your last seen dates. So you can go in there and see, like, if you missed a shelf during inventory, it's easy to wander off and, help somebody and then come back at the wrong shelf location.
And if there are libraries in the audience who are not yet RFID, that's something else we can help with. We've literally helped hundreds of libraries convert to RFID, and very often I get to work with them. And so I'm thrilled to be able to do that, and always a proponent of the wand.
Yeah, to clarify that other question, it looks like, so the last scene shows enlists and actions, which yes, Susie confirmed that. And then prior to submitting the inventory, and that updates in real time. Yes, inventory updates in real time. The last scene date has a number of different implications beyond inventory. So when that gets checked in or gets scanned through inventory, that field updates. So that is also updating in real time along with the inventory.
Yeah, and I might add that in LS staff, under staff services, in the item information on the right, you do get date inventoried. And so you can see if you've done an inventory when that was last seen on an inventory.
Thanks, Pam. And also when you, the other thing I like to talk about with inventory is that if you're in a section, if you do get pulled away and you aren't able to come back to do that inventory right then, or items are getting checked in at the same time, if an item gets checked in that you're inventorying, it'll also be counted. So it works with that as well. One last question I see in here, if you have a large collection, how do books being checked in and checked out affect the inventory if you have to do it over multiple days? So my understanding is once completed, you can mark the items to missing if the item was checked in after you started the inventory. How do you make that work with the last seen date? But I'll pass it to one of our librarians to answer that as well. If you have a larger collection, what does that look like?
Well, so far,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, so far, when we've done an inventory, it's kept up to date with it, and it'll show you it'll show you right at the very end before you finalize the inventory, whether something was checked in and if it's seen it before. So it knows right then. So then the instant you hit the completion on, I've completed this inventory, then you can mark everything that's left over as missing. And at that point, it becomes missing, so it'll show up as a missing item. Does that answer it?
And I think we discovered you can reverse that if you.
Yes, you can reverse it. We did that because we kind of like missed an entire, shelving area.
Yeah, if you don't want to mark an entire shelf space as missing, you can reverse it.
Yeah.
All right, we're at the bottom of the hour again. So thank you all to our panelists for being able to respond to all those questions and share your stories. And thank you to Gretchen and Michael from TechLogic for being able to provide some expertise there. And thanks everyone for joining us. We have lots of great webinars coming up the next couple of months. So keep an eye on your inbox and hopefully we'll see you about this time next week as well. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Good to see y'all.